Nick Jonas, untold story. The world thinks Nick Jonas was born lucky, but luck didn't save him and fame didn't protect him. When you hear the name Nick Jonas, you think of fame. You think of screaming fans. You think of sold out arenas, luxury, success. But what if I told you the most painful chapters of his life were written before the world knew his name? This is not a success story. This is a survival story. A story about a child who grew up too fast, a body that betrayed him too early, and a mind that carried pressure no one saw. This is the untold story of Nick Jonas, a child who never had a normal day. Nick Jonas was born on September 16th, 1992 in Dallas, Texas, USA, a middle-class American family. Nothing flashy, nothing extraordinary, but Nick was not an ordinary child. While other kids woke up for cartoons, Nick woke up for auditions. While other kids learned games, Nick learned how to impress adults. At just 5 years old, Nick stepped onto a stage. Not for fun, but for performance. Broadway auditions, long hours, bright lights. At an age where mistakes should be forgiven, Nick learned something dangerous. If I fail, I disappoint everyone. Praised too early, protected too little. Adults called him talented, special, born star, but no one asked, is he okay? Because praise can be heavy, especially for a child. Nick wasn't learning who he was learning who people wanted him to be. Smile on cue, sing on cue, be grateful, even when tired, even when scared, dream or warning. By the age of 7, Nick Jonas was already performing on Broadway. To the world, a dream come true. To Nick, a warning sign, because Broadway doesn't slow down for children. It doesn't adjust to emotions. Nick worked like an adult, but processed pain like a child. Applause became normal. Silence became terrifying. And unknowingly, his identity became tied to one thing only: performance equals worth. The Jonas Brothers are born early 2000s. Nick's life took a turn that would define his future forever. Alongside his brothers, Kevin Jonas, Joe Jonas, he formed a band, the Jonas Brothers. At first, it felt safe, family, unity, support. But soon, it became something else. Record labels got involved. Managers stepped in. Disney noticed potential. And suddenly, this was no longer about music. It was about business. Disney, fame, a beautiful cage. Disney made them stars. Clean image. Perfect behavior. No mistakes allowed. Nick was still a teenager, but his life was already scripted. What to say, how to act, what not to feel. The world saw a smiling idol, but behind closed doors, Nick was exhausted. Physically, emotionally, mentally, the responsibility he never asked for. Nick wasn't just a band member, he was the youngest, the most disciplined, the emotional anchor. At 13 to 14 years old, Nick carried responsibilities grown men struggle with. He felt responsible for his brothers, the band, the fans, the brand, and pressure doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, "Don't mess this up." When your body becomes your enemy, set up. Around 2005, something strange started happening. Nick felt constant thirst, sudden fatigue, unexplained weakness. On stage, he pushed through, because that's what stars do. They don't complain, they don't slow down. But the truth, his body was silently failing him, and no one knew. Not the fans, not the cameras, not even Nick himself. The day, everything changed. One routine medical check. Just another day until doctors looked at the numbers. Blood sugar levels, dangerously high. Diagnosis, type 1, diabetes. Nick was just 13 years old. Doctors said words no child should hear. This is permanent. You'll live with this forever. No cure, no break, no escape. A child processing a lifetime sentence. Imagine being 13 and realizing your body will never work normally again. Nick didn't cry publicly, he didn't panic on camera, but inside, fear exploded. Because type 1 diabetes isn't just illness, it's daily injections, constant monitoring, risk of collapse, risk of death. And yet, tours continued, shows continued, smiles continued, hiding pain for the world. Nick learned to hide needles backstage, hide fear behind music, hide weakness behind discipline, Because the industry doesn't pause for illness, and fans don't want reality, they want perfection. So Nick became perfect. On the outside, fame gave Nick Jonas everything the world dreams of, but it quietly took away the one thing he needed most: control over his own life. Living on a timer. After his diagnosis, Nick Jonas's life changed forever. Every day became a calculation. Every meal became a risk. Every performance became a gamble. Type 1, diabetes doesn't sleep. It doesn't pause for concerts. It doesn't care if you're famous. Nick had to check blood sugar multiple times a day, inject insulin regularly, watch his energy levels constantly, and yet on stage he had to look unstoppable. One wrong number, one missed signal, and he could collapse. But the crowd would never know. Imagine this moment. Thousands of fans screaming your name, lights blinding your eyes, music vibrating through your chest, and suddenly your hands feel weak, your head feels light, your body doesn't respond. Nick faced this fear every single show. But he didn't cancel tours, he didn't step back, because the industry doesn't reward honesty, it rewards endurance. So Nick endured silently. In the early days, Nick was advised to be careful. Careful with what he shared, careful with what he admitted, careful with appearing weak, because child stars are fragile brands. A medical condition could scare producers, worry sponsors, change public perception. So for a long time, Nick suffered quietly. The public saw a smiling teenager. Behind the scenes was a boy learning to survive his own body. Physical illness was only half the battle. The real war was mental. Nick lived with constant thoughts. What if I collapse on stage? What if I disappoint everyone? What if this ends everything? Fear became background noise. Anxiety became normal. And because he started young, Nick didn't know a life without pressure. Chapter 15, the burden of being the responsible one. Among the Jonas Brothers, Nick was different. He wasn't the loudest. He wasn't the wildest. He was the one who thought ahead. The one who worried. The one who carried the weight. At an age when most teens were figuring themselves out, Nick was managing a global band, a serious medical condition, the expectations of millions. That kind of responsibility leaves marks, invisible ones. By the late 2000s, the Jonas Brothers were unstoppable. Chart-topping albums, world tours, movies, merchandise everywhere. From the outside, perfect success. From the inside, cracks everywhere. Nick felt trapped in a machine that never turned off. Success kept growing, but peace kept shrinking. Music was once Nick's escape. Now it felt like an obligation. Schedules were relentless, expectations endless, rest almost impossible. Nick started questioning things he never dared before. What if this isn't healthy? What if I don't want this anymore? But asking those questions felt like betrayal to fans, to family, to the image. So he stayed silent. The breaking point. No one saw. Every story has a moment where something breaks. For Nick, it wasn't a single incident. It was accumulation. Years of physical stress, emotional suppression, constant performance. Nick felt burned out, disconnected, empty. Smiling felt mechanical. Performing felt heavy. And worst of all, he felt guilty for feeling this way. Because how could someone so lucky feel lost? The hardest decision of his life. In 2013, Nick Jonas made a decision that shocked the world. He decided the Jonas Brothers had to end. Not because of drama, not because of hatred, but because continuing felt dangerous. Later, Nick would admit, we were losing ourselves. Ending the band wasn't about quitting, it was about survival. Fans were devastated, media speculated endlessly, but Nick felt something unexpected. Relief. For the first time in years, the noise stopped. No tours, no screaming schedules, no pressure to be perfect, just silence. And in that silence, Nick faced himself. Without the band, without the structure, without the constant noise, Nick felt exposed. Because when fame disappears, so does the mask. He asked questions he avoided his entire life. Who am I without applause? What do I actually want? How do I live with this body long term? These questions didn't have easy answers, but they were necessary. For the first time, Nick focused on health first. Not image, not numbers, not charts, health. He trained, he disciplined himself, he learned his limits, not to impress others, but to survive. This wasn't a comeback yet. This was recovery. Nick made another brave choice. He started talking openly about type 1 diabetes, not as weakness, but as reality. He wanted people to know, you can chase dreams and still struggle. You can be famous and still fight invisible battles. For millions of fans, this changed everything. Nick wasn't just an idol anymore, he was human. Being open wasn't easy. Some saw him differently. Some doubted his strength, but Nick didn't stop, because honesty gave him something fame never did: freedom. Nick Jonas didn't come back to be famous again. He came back to be free. When the Jonas Brothers ended, many thought Nick Jonas was finished. Former boy band stars rarely survive the fall. But Nick wasn't afraid of falling anymore. Because when you faced illness, pressure, and the fear of losing control over your own body, losing fame doesn't feel so scary. For the first time in his life, Nick wasn't chasing applause. He was chasing balance. Nick rebuilt himself slowly, not loudly, not dramatically. Quiet mornings, strict routines, controlled lifestyle. Because with type 1 diabetes, discipline isn't optional, it's survival. Nick learned his body's limits, his energy patterns, his mental triggers. He trained not to look strong, but to feel stable. And in that stability, something powerful happened. Confidence returned. When Nick Jonas returned to music, it shocked people. This wasn't the teenage idol they remembered. This was controlled, confident, intentional. His solo music wasn't about pleasing everyone. It was about expression, about owning his voice, his choices, his pace. For the first time, Nick was not being managed by fear. Nick stepped into acting, not as a gimmick, not as a celebrity experiment, but as a serious craft. Movies, television, different roles. Each role was a message. I am not who you think I am. Critics began to change their tone. Audiences saw depth. Nick wasn't reinventing himself. He was revealing himself. Nick Jonas didn't hide his illness anymore. He used it. He became an advocate for diabetes awareness, health education, youth mental strength. He spoke publicly, shared honestly, led quietly. For millions living with invisible conditions, Nick became proof. You are not broken, you are adapting. This wasn't branding, this was responsibility. Nick learned something most people never do. Success without health is failure. He stopped measuring life by charts, awards, numbers. Instead, he measured peace, control, longevity. This mindset changed everything. Work slowed down. Life opened up. Then came love. Nick Jonas met Priyanka Chopra. Two global figures, two different cultures, two intense lives. But what connected them wasn't fame, it was understanding. Both knew pressure, public judgment, the cost of visibility. Their relationship wasn't built on perfection, it was built on acceptance. Nick didn't need to perform anymore. He could just be. Marriage didn't complete Nick, it grounded him. For the first time, his life wasn't only about career decisions, it was about health, family, future. Nick became more protective of his time, more intentional with work, more honest with limits. Fame adjusted to his life, not the other way around. Years later, something unexpected happened. The Jonas Brothers reunited. But this time, it was different. No pressure, no forced schedules, no old expectations. They were no longer children, no longer trapped. They were brothers, choosing to work together. That choice made all the difference. Nick Jonas didn't win because he came back famous. He won because he didn't let illness define him. He didn't let fame consume him. He didn't let pressure destroy him. Control became his superpower, not over the world, but over himself. Years from now, Nick Jonas won't be remembered only for songs. He'll be remembered for something deeper. A child star who survived. A patient who adapted. A man who chose health over hype. In a world obsessed with perfection, Nick chose honesty. Final message. Nick Jonas's real victory wasn't fame, money, or applause. It was learning how to live with what he couldn't change and still move forward. Everyone, please like and subscribe.